7 o'clock. We have a lot of material to get through tonight. My name is Nancy Leifer. I am the co-president of the League of Women Voters of Missoula, and I am very pleased to be here this evening to welcome all of you to this meeting on affordable housing. I'd like to start, while we wait for a few more folks to filter in, I'll start with a little bit about the League. League of Women Voters was founded in 1920, 6 months before the passage of the 19th Amendment that was the one that issued the right of voting to women. So we're coming up on our 100th anniversary next year. The League in Montana was started in 1920 also, and in fact, Jeanette Rankin was one of the founding members. So we're very excited about that upcoming anniversary and about the role that people in Missoula played in that event. So the League is, our purpose as a League of Women Voters is several-fold. Primarily, we're very interested in defending and supporting our democratic institutions in the United States. We try to support voter rights, voter registration, we're anti-gerrymandering, there's a whole variety of things that we're involved in that are the basic fundamental building blocks of how we run our society. But one of the other things that we were founded to do is to help people become more informed about the issues. And that's the reason why we're here tonight. We wanted to be able to offer an opportunity to those who are interested in Missoula to come and find out more about the myths and realities of housing affordability here in Missoula. Our intent for the evening is to help understand the constraints of household incomes compared to construction costs, and how these constraints then influence how we go forward from here. We also are going to be quickly summarizing what are the programs we have in place already that will help address our housing affordability issues, and what the gap is between what those programs can do and what the needs are. So this is a meeting to help clarify and understand how this all falls together. And I think all of you who are here now, probably when you sat down you noticed that there was an index card on your chair. And if not, raise your hand and we'll bring you one. What we'd like to do is to help foster understanding, to have you, if you come across a question in your mind as we're going through these presentations, a question about clarifying what the speaker is trying to say or what this means or something along those lines, jot that down immediately on that index card and hold your hand up, and one of our League members will come and get it and bring it to our moderator over here, and the moderator will make sure that question gets asked at the appropriate time so that we don't let things slide by without having everybody following where we're at. So that's the logistics for the evening, and we're going to be going through some exercises. This is going to be kind of a mathematical evening. We have some delightful things to look at, like pro formas and spreadsheets. Ooh! I can just see everybody's eyes glazing all over already. But these are really, really fascinating ones because they're estimates of housing costs for both a rental project and a home ownership project here in Missoula, from using costs that are pretty much current to where we are right now. So that's part of the nuts and bolts of what we wanted to get into, so that we can really see at that level what these things add up to and why we have such a problem with affordability. This presentation also, I'm very happy to report, is going to be recorded by the Community Access Television and rebroadcast on MCAT. And so I would like to say right now, thank you to MCAT. And I have a statement I'm supposed to read, so I'll just read half of it not very well, so I'll read the whole thing the way I'm supposed to. This presentation is being recorded by Missoula Community Access Television as part of a media assistance grant donated to the League by MCAT. So the value of this grant is about, for this evening, will be probably about $750 to $1,000. So thank you very much to MCAT for making this possible. We appreciate your presence here and the ability to be able to take this information and make it available to more people who couldn't be here tonight. Wonderful. So that's the logistics. We have a very tight agenda, a very tight schedule. All of our presenters have time limits in terms of how much time they have, so we can get through a lot of material. We have a timer in the front row who will be signaling them at the appropriate time that they need to start winding it up. So we also, however, do want to make sure that nothing if it's not clear, do raise questions so that we have the questions asked as we go along. So with that, I'd like to introduce our moderator for the evening, who is Mary Laporte, and she is with the League of Women Voters. And since we have a couple extra minutes, maybe what we will do is maybe go through and just do a quick lineup of who's here, and then we'll go back and introduce them all again.
Okay. Thank you, Nancy. Good evening, everyone. We'll tell you who's here, who's seated up here at the front row. We have Andrea Davis, Executive Director of Homeward, Lori Davidson, Executive Director of the Missoula Housing Authority, and Jim McGrath, Director of HUD Programs from Missoula Housing Authority are here. We next have Colin Banks, who's a retired, I don't think he's really retired, that's what I hear, a retired realtor, and he's been a longtime advocate for affordable entry-level homes, and he serves as Vice Chair of the Missoula Housing Authority. And I think, is that Bob Oakes is here as well, and he is Executive Director of the North Missoula Community Development Corporation. And then finally we have Aaron Pean, Director of Housing and Community Development for the City of Missoula. And we'll go through introductions again as we go forward through the program and what their role will be tonight. So thank you for coming. So we'd like to go ahead and begin with Andrea Davis from Homeward. And Andrea will take us through a household budget worksheet for the average renter household renting the average price 2-bedroom apartment.
Are we ready?
Yes, thanks, Andrea.
Okay, you bet. You want me to go ahead and take the podium?
Yes, yes,
okay,
please.
Okay, great. Wow. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us, everybody. I am impressed. It is beautiful outside. So we're just going to pretend the sun is shining through the back and it's still with us. So again, my name is Andrea Davis with Homeward. I'm really happy to be here. Many thanks to Nancy and Mary for putting together a really wonderful evening and a lot of energy that you put in towards helping people understand issues that affect us in our community. Homeward, for those that may not know who we are, we're a nonprofit organization. We're a community housing development organization, and we're headquartered here in Missoula. We build homes that Montanans can afford around the state, and then we're also a housing counseling agency. So we do two things. We build homes, both rental and home ownership, mostly rental homes, and then we are an educator and a counselor. And in fact, we have our homebuyer educator with us tonight. I don't mean to give her away, but Julie Pavlish is right over there. She's amazing. So we have put together this cost of living activity partly because for a lot of folks that may not understand what it's like to earn what we would consider a lower wage or a low to moderate wage, and what it's like to live with that wage in Missoula, or folks that may have purchased a home 40, 50 years ago and really not understand what it's like to try to enter into the home ownership market here in 2019. We put together a cost of living activity with some factual data as it relates to Missoula. And so I'm just going to start walking through this because I think it's a really good way to help understand how a lot of people in Missoula are making do or not making do. And so at the very top, everybody should have one, and if you don't have one, please raise your hand. I'll make sure you get one. I have extras. These are on our website too, so certainly to be shared. And if we start at the very top of the piece of paper on the left-hand corner, which up on the screen, 47% of Missoulians spend over 30% of their income on a home, on housing. And half of those spend over 50%. So let me stop on that statistic a little bit there, because two things. First of all, this information is cited at the bottom. It comes from the 2018 Missoula Housing Report, the Missoula Organization of Realtors, and Colin Bangs will speak to that as well. That's also data collected by our local municipality. We have a consolidated plan that tracks census data, and so that is a process that's being updated as we speak, but these are numbers that we're using from that consolidated plan. And so in Missoula, we've got about half of the people that live here are renters. And that's not really a surprise in a university town. Bozeman is about the same. And it's considered affordable when you can afford your home, when you pay 1/3 of your income, your gross income, towards the cost of your home. And that is rent and utilities, or that's mortgage and utilities. So either way, thinking about 1/3 of your income going towards the cost of your home is what's considered affordable. So we know that we've got almost nearly half of Missoulians spending more than 30%, and that then half of those, so maybe 23, 24% of Missoulians are spending half of their income to afford their home. So then what are they not affording? And again, we'll walk through that a little bit. Continuing on this green bar, just to walk through our rationale for how we established this cost of living activity, $11.49 is the mean renter wage in Missoula, and that data came from the 2018 Out of Reach report by the National Low Income Housing Coalition. Again, this is census data, and so census data can always lag by a year or so, so keep that in mind. If we were to put a pin in it today, it could be a little bit different, but that's the most up-to-date information we have. And so we put a couple of examples of, well, who's earning $11.50 an hour? Retail workers, somebody that might be living on fixed income, a retiree, a single parent, certainly that might be working any number of entry-level or not so entry-level jobs. I mean, remember, Montana's minimum wage, while it's more than the federal minimum wage, is only $8.50 an hour. So this mean renter wage is $3 more per hour than our minimum wage. Somebody that might be living on disability, a recent graduate, all sorts of kinds of people earning in this wage band. Again, if you're going to pay 1/3 of your income and you make $11.50 an hour, then what's affordable for your home, whether that be a rental home or a mortgage, but rental home would be the $597 or $600 a month. Again, if it's truly at 1/3 of your income, that would be rent and utilities both. And again, what we're seeing, 51% of Missoulian are renters, and we don't see many apartments priced or homes priced at $600, especially all in. The average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in Missoula is $925. And what is not clear about this, and it's hard, this is hard data for us to collect, us as a community, is whether that $925 includes utilities. It most likely does not. Some of the funding sources that the Missoula Housing Authority and Homeward utilizes, North Missoula Community Development Corporation utilizes, we often, for our rents at some of the properties we develop, we have to include the utilities within the rent in terms of that maximum amount. So it's interesting when we have people compare what they might rent from, let's say, at the Solstice, where our offices are at the corner of Russell and Broadway, and a market unit. They say, well, the market unit's only a couple $100 more, but often utilities are not calculated in. And then they can count on usually $150 more per month at least, depending on the home, depending on how the home is built, how old the home is. So at night, how am I doing?
We have a clarifying question.
Okay.
We decided we were going to just take questions
Great.
as we go. This is why we are using the mean wage, but also the average rent. They're slightly different.
Slightly different,
It's going to be technical tonight.
Absolutely, and that is because that is the data that's been made available to us. But I absolutely, totally understand the difference between mean and average. One thing I'll back up. Sorry, I guess I wasn't supposed to move this microphone. Okay, it's a little tricky.
Yes.
Don't touch it. I will also say that in 2015, Homeward conducted a market study. When we built our Sweetgrass Commons property, which is down by the old Sawmill District, it's down on California Street, and it's 27 homes. We had the market study done in 2015. Okay, so it's at least 3 years old at this point. The average rent at that time was also $925. So what's interesting about this is that the National Low Income Housing Coalition has caught up to that. You're right, mean and average are two different numbers. It's information that we have available. So thank you for pointing that out. Data can be a very tricky thing in that respect. So going back to that 900, did I satisfy that answer? Is that okay? Okay. So that $925, if somebody was going to afford that rent at 30% or 1/3 of their income, they would need to make $17.79 an hour. So you can see that if the mean renter wage is really about $11.50, and you need to earn, I'll just for argument's sake earn $17.50, then we've got a large gap. I mean, at $6 an hour of a wage gap is very significant. And so again, 50% of Missoulians being renters, we've got a math problem. We've got an affordability problem in Missoula. So going through the actual budget items, we worked with our clients and customers that come in to see us in our financial literacy and financial coaching program, as well as our first-time homebuyer education. I have to be honest, some of these are probably outdated. Some of these numbers probably need to be increased for inflation. But starting at the top, if you earn the mean wage, which again is about $11.50 an hour, and you work full-time, you're earning $23,899 a year. So let's just say you earn $24,000 a year. We subtracted a nominal $100 for payroll taxes, and showing you then what you're operating with per month. So you're operating with $1,892. And so then we went through what is a typical budget for people. What are people trying to afford in their lives? So some of the things that are non-negotiables were your home, your utilities, again, your home, and groceries and household supplies. Again, we only put $300 towards groceries and household supplies. How many people live in this home? Don't know. This isn't representative of a certain number of people. It's just demonstrating the wage in terms of affording a home here in Missoula, an apartment and a rental. So at the end of the day, when we say, okay, $300 at least for groceries and household supplies, $925 for the average two-bedroom apartment, and $100 in utilities, that cost per month is $1,325. So it leaves you $667. And at that point, and what we've done with this before is say, grab your pencil and decide what it is that you want to budget for. Do you have children? Are you paying for child care? Do you have student loans? Do you want to make payments on those? Do you want to make more than your minimum payment? Do you have a car payment? What kind of debts are you paying? Let alone, what are the things that you want to be able to afford in your life? So, and like I mentioned, I mean, there's certain circumstances on here. If you had, we could go back and forth all day long. If we had a single parent that had 4 children, could they get a child care subsidy that might be able to pay for some child care? Yes, possibly, although we have a shortage of that very valuable resource in our community. And I'll just mention that if parents can't afford their child care to go to work, well, then they have to give up something somewhere. So it's continuing about what are we sacrificing. So at the end of the day, I mean, this activity is really meant to spark a conversation, which is, what is it that you would be willing to live without in order to afford your home? And how does that make you feel? On the backside, we asked some questions, and a couple quick things. How am I doing on time, Mary? Oh, sorry, John, you're the stop. Okay, so there's a couple quick questions on there. I'll just mention, one thing that's not on there is saving for retirement, or saving at all. And so ultimately, we're talking about how do people survive, let alone how are they getting ahead. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Andrea. We will have time for questions individually at the end of the total presentation tonight. Next, I'd like to introduce Lori Davidson. She is Executive Director of the Missoula Housing Authority. And Lori will take us through a pro forma for a new rental unit construction project, illustrating the cost of construction and ongoing operating costs and the need for subsidies to build new rental housing. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you. And welcome, everybody. I'm glad to be here tonight. It's not only a sunny day, it is spring equinox. Spring is on the way, yay! And a full moon. Doesn't happen very often, so we have an auspicious occasion tonight. I think that we'll start going through this. This is just to give you an example of what we look like when what we look at when we're trying to determine whether a project is feasible or not. And we picked a project here which has no federal assistance of any kind. I kind of wanted to do that so you could see exactly what we're dealing with and how big the gap is between an affordable rent and what it takes to build something that is affordable. So if you start looking at the, can I walk around with the mic?
You bet. Just take it out of there.
Thank you. So if you look at If you look at the top line here, this is set up so we could do a variation of bedroom sizes and total square footage. But this is a very simple project. We were looking at a small project where we were going to build 46 units of 260 square foot apartments, 260 square foot homes, very small homes. The newest thing, right? They're doing it in cities and high-tech people, the people in tech jobs and students, they love these smaller apartments. It was kind of an experimental project we were looking at, and it's not dead yet, not completely dead. We're still looking at it. So we have 46 units at about 260 square feet each, and there is some community space included in here. We tried to start at a $500 a month rent, and that included utilities, and that was so far out there we couldn't do it. So we looked at a $600 a month rent, which is right in line with what Andrea was looking at. You know, if you're making $11.50 an hour, you can afford a $600 rent. So that gives you a total monthly rent of $27,600, and then if you move over to the left, yes. There you go. So you take that monthly rental income. You have some vacancy. You have to figure you're going to have about a 5 to 7% vacancy rate over the course of a year. You subtract that, and you get an annual net rental revenue of about $314,600. And then you look at the expenses that you have. You have management fees and costs for your employees. You have so you have the management fee, which is typically 5%, and that goes to whoever is managing your property, and it pays for all of their expenses involved in managing the property, except for personnel costs. Those are figured in separately for us. You have advertising costs, office expenses. We're paying all the utilities, so we have to include gas, water, lighting, sewer. These are all estimates. We don't know exactly what these might be, but we compared these to projects that we have already in operations. You have trash removal, you have payroll for a property manager. I think here we figured at 25% of a person for property management and 25% of a person for maintenance. With 46 units, even though they're small, you're going to have a lot of turnover. There's somebody who has to release the apartments. They have to clean them in between. They have to make repairs. They have to keep up the grounds. Those all cost money. You have insurance. The big unknown for us in this project was the real estate tax. This was our best guess after talking to the Department of Revenue and to Colin, who actually operates rental properties that are not government subsidized. So that's a big chunk of money. Those taxes are a lot. So when we look at the total operating expenses, we get almost $147,000. We also have annual replacement reserves, because over the course of time, you're going to repair roofs, you're going to have hot water heaters that go out, you're going to have to replace your on-site equipment like lawnmowers and snow removal equipment, all of those major expenses that come up. So you want to set a little money aside there for a rainy day. And when you take the total revenue and subtract your total income when you subtract your total expenses from your total income, you get your total income available for debt. And in a project like this, that's what we're looking at. How much debt can this project afford to take on? Because whatever it can't afford to finance through a bank, you have to come up with somewhere else. And so it's coming from the owner, it's coming from investors, or it's coming from government subsidies. In this case, the owner said, I'm allergic to those. I don't want to use any government money. I don't want to deal with days vacant wages. If we were dealing with federal subsidies and things in here, these numbers would be going up. Not the operating costs so much, but when we get to the construction pro forma, those costs go up when you get federal subsidies involved. So in here, we did a little calculation over here of how much of a monthly payment we could afford. The other thing the bank is going to make us do is have a debt coverage ratio of 1.15%. And that means that for every dollar of debt you have, the bank wants you to have $1.15 of income. Because you have to have a little net cash flow at the end. and they want to be sure that you're going to be able to afford to make your loan payments. So we figured that in this project, we could borrow $1.95 million, and the whole rest of the construction cost here has to be financed some other way. So if we go over to the construction pro forma, and starting at the top, one big thing here, look at the land cost. It's zero. The owner here said, I've got a chunk of land. I'm going to give it to you if you can build something on it. So this is a huge contributing factor to the cost of anything that we want to build. In this case, it's zero. Wow, what a windfall. And then we go on to the other kinds of expenses that you get in a construction project. You've got site work, you've got landscaping, your sewer hookups and permits. These are all the sewer and water lines and the electrical lines that you have to bring in to run a project. You're probably running cable and internet in there as well. And then you have just the simple hard cost of construction. How much does it cost you to buy the materials and to pay for the labor to put that building up? Right now it's running about $160 a square foot. Really high. And actually we think $160 a square foot is kind of low. It might even be higher than that now. And so remember, we're very small units here. We got 46 of them, but they're only 260 square feet, plus some community space. So 13,134 square feet times $160 a square foot, we get over $2 million just in the cost of hard construction. And on top of that, you've got architectural fees. Someone has to design it. You've got engineering fees that go in there too, because somebody has to make sure it's not going to fall down and collapse from the snow load, right? You have other kinds of things that happen, like surveys that have to happen. Depending, your lender might require a survey called an ALTA survey, which just locates all the utilities and all of the points that are on the land that might affect how you build your project. If you've got federal subsidies or low-income housing tax credits, which is another way that we finance these projects, if you've got those in there, these costs go up incrementally. You've got phase one environmental costs, you've got geotech costs, you've got lawyers and accountants fees up the yin-yang. And so these costs are even higher. You're getting money from these subsidy sources, but you're also increasing the costs. Plus you have Davis-Bacon wages. So if you're using federal dollars in here, that $160 a square foot, that's going to be $165 a square foot for sure, because Davis-Bacon wages are higher than going out and hiring a contractor and not having to do the Davis-Bacon. So you've got insurance costs, you've got the cost of builder's risk insurance, your contractor has liability insurance, you have property insurance while you're under construction. You've got construction interest because you're borrowing money to buy the materials and to pay the contractor while the construction is going on. You've got all these other fees that may or may not be involved. We've budgeted them just in case. And the origination fees are part of your loan costs, so those go along with the construction loan. At the end of the construction, then you roll it over into a permanent loan, and each of those loans has fees associated with it. And then, if you go down a little farther, you can see all of these other things here. We don't even have those costs in this project because we're not considering that there's any federal money. If we were using federal money or low-income housing tax credits, we'd be doing market studies, appraisals. We'd have tax credit fees involved, things that we have to pay the state in order to get the tax credits, application fees, and all different kinds of other fees involved. And then you see there's a developer's fee there. And some people say, well, why does the developer make a fee? Well, the developer's putting a year to 2 years of work into the project. And if this project has cost overruns, that's where the cost overruns get paid for. The developer's taking a risk. He's risking everything he has to make sure that this project gets built, and he's on the hook for that, not the owner, but the developer. So that $100,000 is, number one, what the developer is getting paid for the 1 to 2 years that he's of work that he's putting in here. And he's got overhead costs too. He's got space, he's probably got someone that works for him that's helping him with the project. All the things that you have, all the costs that you have when you're running an office, because the developer is another business. And they need a little bit of profit because they want to use that money to start their next project. So there has to be a little bit of money in there for a developer too. So when you look at the total project cost, you've got over $3 million in costs. And let's see, where's this little calculation here? Let's go back to the first page. Look at the owner's contribution here, over $1 million. That's what the gap is when you're looking at putting a project together and trying to charge an affordable rent. And this is only 260 square feet per unit. Imagine if it was 600 square feet per unit. That's kind of typical for a one-bedroom unit. It's going to be 3 times that. So this gap, when we're trying to do affordable housing, this gap is what we're trying to fill. And we fill that gap with things like federal grants, home dollars, or CDBG money. I mentioned low-income housing tax credits, which if we're using those, it's going to pay a pretty big portion of this. Somewhere between 75 and 90% of that can be covered with low-income housing tax credits. And that means that the rents will be capped, so the people who can live there will have to be at a certain income level. They won't be able to make more than a certain amount of money, and that means that we can't charge them more than a certain amount of rent. So you have trade-offs. When you're using those federal dollars, you always have a trade-off. The costs go up, but in a LIHTC project where you have those costs, you're getting more money in upfront as equity upfront, so the money comes in on the construction end. And then you have less debt to carry on the back end, which means that this project might be feasible under that tax credit scenario. Because you've got that gap covered, and this debt amount is probably a lot lower. So the amount of rents that you're charging, they're capped, but they're enough to cover that, because you have that equity that came in up front to help with the construction costs. What else? What kind of questions do you have about that? Mm-hmm.
I'd like you to come to the microphone, please. We're taping for MCAT.
Oh.
And we have a couple extra minutes. I talked fast. So my question is, how repeatable is, when you find a good model that's affordable, is that something that's repeatable in the city if you find similar space and, you know, if you find this model so you don't have to have the same architect, you know, all the same costs? Like the Ford car idea, you know, build something solid and keep building it. Yeah, it is possible. It's hard to do, number one, because finding a lot that's the same size and has the same features is sometimes difficult, so you have to redesign the building a little bit to make it fit. The architect is still going to make a fee, even though they might not make the full fee. They still deserve to get some money. It's their design, and so they should have some compensation because you're using their design again, and it's their property. So you want to compensate them in some way. It is possible. It's really difficult to do, I will say that. Even if you can build the same thing, there's almost always some kind of modification you're going to have to make, just to make it fit the site, because no 2 sites are the same. Did this make sense?
Mm-hmm. Very clear.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you, Lori. We have part 2 of the Missoula Housing Authority presentation, sort of based on the realities, and I think that Jim is going to take us through some statistics on the number of Missoula renter households that are paying more than 30% of their incomes on housing, a summary of the units of housing that help low-income households, either through vouchers or through subsidized construction, and we'll have a few minutes for questions.
I just want to reiterate one thing before I leave, and that is we had 0 land cost in here. Don't forget that, because that's huge.
Hi. Thanks for having us here. I'm very honored to be with this panel. I'm kind of the junior member here, and I feel thrilled to be here. I'm just going to talk really quickly about just some of the framework of how of what resources we have, but what really the gap kind of looks like. And Dre, this is going to be in the 2019 housing report, which, by the way, plug for the housing report, next Thursday at 10 o'clock, the Missoula housing report will be released. But in the year between when Dre had her data and this year, the percentage of renters that are rent burdened went up to 49%. And so I did a little, and so that's in 2017 again, census numbers like a couple of years. And so just the math on that is literally 7,528 households in Missoula. 7,528 households in Missoula paying more than 30% of their income. I didn't get the number for the 50 plus. Excuse me. So what do we have on board right now to serve folks that need some help with that? We have total rental assistance in Missoula, including ones that are dedicated to special populations such as homeless, disabled, seniors, veterans, and so on. About 1,700. Missoula Housing Authority administers about 1,100 of those. Now, when I say rental assistance, this is direct federal money that comes in every month, month by month, unless they don't give it to you, which occasionally happens, right? But it comes in. It has to come in every month, and it's where you get help paying your rent. And so a person will pay the 30%, which makes it so they can afford where they're living, but they may be living at a place that's an average rent of $925 or $1,000 or whatever it might be that you have to find in Missoula. And so the difference between that, maybe it's $560 or something, and $9, that's going to be paid for through some sort of rental assistance. That's what I mean by rental assistance. Some direct subsidy of cash channeled basically from the federal government through a program or a project. Some of these are projects, so they are places like our public housing where the unit itself has that subsidy. Another example might be Council Groves, if you're familiar with a place like that, or Silver Crest for seniors. Okay, then, and by the way, currently we have this month 1,396 people on our Section 8 waiting list. That's one of the waiting lists for these. Each program will have its own waiting list, and the wait times are always calculated in years. And these federal funds are not growing. They're very, very hard to get additional ones. And we get them maybe one or two if we can. So then we also have another source, and this is really what the name of the game is in development. This is the kind of stuff that Homework does and that MHA does. This is the kind of stuff that Lori is talking about, and I refer to them as rent restricted, right? As Lori explained, there's a cap on the rent. Now the tenant will pay whatever that cap is, so if it's $600, you owe $600, and if you lose your job, you still owe $600. It's not 30% of your income. It's just 30% of your income if you are working at that $1,150. So if you got $850, it's probably going to be a struggle, but it's better than the average rent, right? So these are rent restricted, and so I calculated these are going to be a little bit low. I'll probably miss a couple little projects, but we have right now about 896 on the ground. Now I did this. This is a kind of a goofy math, but so I took the rent burden and I subtracted all the stuff that we have, and I said, well, that's a gap of about 5,000 units. Now, actually, then I thought about it again for a minute, and actually, if you have 7,500 people who are rent burdened, that gap is 7,500, because the people who are in these affordable housing projects are probably not rent burdened. So it could be higher than that. It doesn't matter, because when it's 5,000 or 7,500 or 2,500, that is a really substantial number, particularly because even though the main way that we can develop this stuff is through the tax credit program, it is so competitive, and actually through some other grant programs, that we average in Missoula about 25 to 30 units per year. There's some years, like last year, where none really, the doors didn't open on any units. The year before, we had some more. Next year, a couple of years, we may have, hopefully the Housing Authority will have a project that will be 200 units in a couple of years. That's really huge. But to get to any significant number of this gap, it has to be way, by factors of 10 or 100 more than what we're able to do through the programs that are in place now. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Jim. Next, we'd like to introduce. Thank you. Colin Banks is going to present next. He's a retired realtor, retired developer of entry-level homes, and he's vice chairman of the Missoula Housing Authority. Colin will be presenting a spreadsheet for construction costs of a starter home to illustrate costs of new construction and what can be built to meet the budget of a median income household. He will also summarize statistics on the number of people interested in purchasing a home, how well the housing ladder is working, and how to lower the cost of new starter homes. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you. Just one thing on the housing report that's coming up next Thursday is at the Edgewater. So if anybody's interested in going. And that gives you a lot more information than what you'll get tonight. What I'm trying to show you tonight is why we can't build single-family homes for the average working family in Missoula any longer. It's just not working. So we start at the top, and what we're looking at here is the actual costs of 2018 costs of building a 840 square foot townhome attached to 2 other units with a full basement and a double-car garage.
How many bedrooms?
2 bedrooms, 1 bath.
2 bedrooms.
With the full basement and the double-car garage, you'll at least have some storage and some expansion, later future expansion, etc. It's attached to 2 other townhome units. And I'm not going to go through these individual costs unless somebody has any questions on them. Let's go right directly down to the $143,000 total cost there, and that's the total cost for building that unit. The reason I picked that particular unit to use, there were 2 reasons. One is I could get actual 2018 costs. The other ones I looked at, I could get 2016 or 2017 costs, and I wanted it updated. And secondly, I wanted something that was within the reach of the medium income household. And that either just barely or just about is. It's in the price range of what the medium income, half of the households can afford. And the big thing you have to know about that $144,000 basically is it's gone up approximately 30% in the last 5 years. And the one builder I worked with said in 6 years it was 37%, so $6,000 a year over 6 years, and the other 2 builders said 30% over 5 years. So those costs are very real, and they come storming down at us. The question, of course, is why? And it's very simple supply and demand economics. Before the recession hit, there was a booming construction business going on in Missoula and throughout the nation. A lot of houses getting built, a lot of product in the pipeline, a lot of people had good jobs. When the recession hit, it was primarily a real estate recession, and what died was the real estate construction business. So all of a sudden you had all of these people who had good jobs, well-paying jobs, who didn't have work anymore. Some of them were able to go to the Bakken, and that was still booming, and have jobs there temporarily until they can move back later. Most of them got out of the business and found something else to do. My favorite, very favorite, construction supervisor that was working for us is a nurse at Providence now. And I'm sure he's a good nurse because he was a great construction supervisor. So then when the recession got over and things started picking up, we started building more houses, jumped back up to something comparable to what we were doing before the recessions hit. But the workers weren't there. So the cost goes up for hiring and training new workers. The competition goes up so people can charge more. But not just for the workers there. The whole pipeline of everything you need to build a house, everything from concrete to countertops, to kitchen cabinets to carpeting, all of those pipelines of products coming down the road had shrunk because the demand had been gone. The demand had been gone for 6 or 7 years. So now they had to ramp back up and open up new concrete plants or whatever they have to do to get the materials available to come down to you. So the cost climbed and climbed and climbed as they're trying to build the capacity back up to provide the materials you need to build the houses. And the only good news here is that it appears that the rate of increase of prices has slowed down the last couple of years. More like 3% a year as opposed to 6% a year. And the cost of lumber has actually stabilized. So at least one part of the pipeline has apparently gotten back up to the capacity it needs to provide the products needed to build the houses. So that number is very knowable, that $144,000. The next numbers on the lot is a crapshoot. I don't really know what those numbers would be today. I took those numbers from something we developed in 2016 and 2017 that we were able to do because we found a piece of ground that was for sale that was actually going to work to make that happen. But those were old numbers, so the infrastructure probably costs more now. And I went to the multiple listing and looked at everything that's sold in land in 2018 and everything for sale last week. And I found nothing on multiple that I thought you could go build this type of a project. Either the zoning wasn't right, the land was way too expensive, or there were a lot of different building lots available if you wanted to go build a $400,000 house on a golf course, or even not on a golf course. There's a good supply of lots available between the $70,000 and $120,000 price range. But even if you wanted to, you couldn't go buy 2 of those lots and put 4 townhomes on them because the covenants of the zoning are very strictly single family. So we don't have the ability right now to produce the kind of housing on any type of scale for that people can afford. Now, why am I so concentrating on townhomes instead of single family? It just costs too much now to do single family. And so to look at that, I went to multiple again and took a look at all of the houses that are sold between $200,000 and $300,000 in the last year. And I was looking specifically for a new house that was built in 2018. And I found one that sold for under $300,000. It was $293,000. It was a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house on a crawl space with a double-car garage. So it wasn't that uncomparable to the house we're talking about here. It had a larger main floor, but it didn't have the full basement for expansion. And it had more expensive flooring and cabinetry and things like that. But it wasn't that much difference. Most of the difference in the price range there was the difference between it being a single-family house on a 4,500 square foot lot or a townhome on a smaller lot. And the reason it cost difference, there's 2. Of course, one is the lot. If you can build 4 townhomes where you build 2 single-family houses, then the land and infrastructure costs gets divided by 4 instead of 2, so your lot costs are down. But it's also the building costs. We discovered when we started building single-family and townhome units in the same development, we could build a 1,300 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath house with a full basement and a double-car garage. We could build a townhome, same size, same number of bedrooms, different floor plan, of course, but all the same amenities, same quality, everything. It would be between 10 and 15% less in construction costs for the townhome compared to the house. That was more than we expected, because we looked at material costs, and you weren't saving that much in siding and some concrete, but those savings weren't that much. What the real difference was efficiency. when the excavator brings all this equipment in to dig a hole, it doesn't cost twice as much to dig twice as big a hole, or 4 times as much to dig 4 times as big of a hole. Same thing when the concrete guy comes in and puts his forms in. It doesn't cost twice as much to frame in 2 units that are attached. So the efficiency of the building is what brought us the efficiency and the price tag. So we have a lot of people who can afford this $214,000 house, and we know we have a lot more people who want to. One of the surveys that was done recently said that 79% of the renters in Missoula want to buy a house someday. That statistic has changed dramatically since the one I saw 10 years ago. That apparently the new group of people moving up have finally figured out that homeownership is really a good idea. So the demand for these type of houses is phenomenal. The availability of us being able to build them is very lacking, and we have to find a way to change that. We need to find more ways, more places that you can build this type of housing, and more way to help people get into this type of housing. So, the other thing I looked at is I said, I wonder what the market's really like today in that $200,000 to $300,000 categories. I looked at the homes sold in 2018 and looked at what was on the market now. And we had sold 485 houses. They had sold 485 houses last year. And they had 32 on the market last week, between $200,000 and $300,000. So even that market has a real shortage at the present time. So, when they talk about the housing market in general, they quite often refer to it as the housing ladder. The most difficult step is getting on the first rung. Once you buy the first home and build equity in it and improve it maybe, or just get the loan paid down, or whatever you do, it grows money for you. And then you can sell that and move up to the next home, and sell that and move up to the next home, and till you get to your dream home, if you ever do. Or maybe the second home is your dream home. Or maybe if you're really lucky, it's even the first one. But you've got to get to that first rung. It reminds me of neighborhood kids getting together and building a treehouse. And the big kids who build the treehouse don't want the little kids up there. So when they put the ladder, they make sure the bottom rung is too high for the little kids to get up there. The mothers of the little kids probably appreciate that too. But we've got an awful lot of people. A majority of the people in the city can't get on the first rung at this point, just like the little kids. And I'm not trying to say that anybody ever tried to do that to the people of Missoula. I'm just saying that the things we have done, combined with the things that the world has done to us, has put us in that position. And that we have tried before to make some dramatic changes that will help us to provide this housing for people, but it hasn't happened. So I'm going to close with my biggest fear and my dream. My biggest fear is that right now we are in a really great process we're going through to figure out what to do to solve this problem. My biggest fear is we're going to look at this and we're going to do it part way. We're going to do a little bit of it. We're going to do some of it. But we won't do the things we need to do to really make a difference. And if we do that, we may condemn Missoula to being forever a place where the people who work here can't afford to own a home here. And to me, that would be very sad. My dream is that we'll get it right this time. And I believe in that dream. Probably because I'm optimistic. If I wasn't optimistic, I couldn't have been doing this for over 40 years. But I know Missoula. And I know that the vast majority of people in Missoula have good hearts. They really care about their neighbor. They don't want any little kids left off the bottom rung. They want to make this work. So my dream is we'll get this right, and we won't become the next Boulder or Bozeman, or the people who work here can't afford to buy a home. Thank you.
Yes, I am going to interject a question that I think is appropriate that we already had from the floor, and there's an opportunity for more. But someone wanted to know that the understanding is that other states have more financial tools than Montana to create affordable housing. What are some examples of those tools, and what does the state of Montana have? And I know that that might be something for Andrea. It's going to be up next anyway.
Okay, well, I'll answer the best of my ability. It's not necessarily part of my presentation on the mortgage, but so the state of Montana really doesn't have a whole lot of resources beyond what we channel through the federal programs. And there's a caveat to that. You know, we have a Montana Board of Housing that is our state housing finance agency, and they do bond for single-family mortgages. So that is generated from Montana, but I'll tell you, it's what's called, we use our Montana Private Activity Bond cap for that, and that's actually federally allocated. So the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program that both Jim and Lori mentioned earlier, and it is the #1 program in the United States in terms of rental home production. That is a federal program, and it's a tax credit. So investors basically, when we as applicants apply competitively for those tax credits, and we receive those tax credits, we sell those to investors, and those investors actually offset their federal tax obligation for a certain number of years, and we get money up front to help pay for the construction. It's very simple. Some states have state housing tax credits. In fact, I was in Helena this morning testifying for state housing tax credits, because we are trying to have the state of Montana recognize that if we could generate the same amount of state housing tax credits that we get in federal tax credits on an annual basis, we could double the production of rental homes in Montana. It would be significant. And when people can afford their home, not only does construction create jobs and it creates wages, but when somebody can afford where they live, like the example we used earlier of that $300 difference between what you might be paying on a typical 2-bedroom and what you would be paying if you could afford it at $11.50 an hour at $600. If you had $300 more in your pocket, you're likely to spend it in the local economy. You're going to pay off some debts, and you're going to save some money. I mean, you're going to do one or all of those things. Either way, that generally is good for local governments, and it's good for the economy. So talk to me later, because I'd love to get you to talk to your representatives, because this is the closest we have ever been in the state of Montana in generating Montana resources. Additionally, we don't necessarily generate any grant dollars from the state. We have a housing trust fund in the state of Montana, but we just don't fund it. So in other words, we don't have a housing trust fund. And what we need to do is we need to find money to fund that. So they either have to fund that through the general fund at the state level, or we need to find resources to do that. One of the things that we've done this year is we've said, okay, why don't you take a small little bit from that permanent coal trust fund? We have $1 billion at the state from the coal trust fund. Take a bit of that and invest that. Let's invest that in projects like Lori demonstrated. That $1 million gap, we're saying, let's take that $1 million. You can charge interest. We'll pay back the trust fund with interest. But let's invest in Montana and in Montanans. Both of these two bills have made their way through, the last of which has been amended almost to the point where it's a bit of a Frankenstein walking around at this point, but it still is doing pretty well. So there are some other types of funding programs that some states might have, but those are two examples that we don't have in Montana that we're working on right now. And it would definitely catalyze a lot more development. But we need to talk about what are some other kinds of resources that we could use for home buyers as well.
And you can mention their names and encourage them to vote for it.
Oh, excellent. Okay, great. Thank you. So the last one I was speaking to was House Bill 16, and that's where we would create a loan program from the coal trust dollars. And that has made its way through the House and the Senate. And so we need to get it off the Senate floor at this point. So we need to talk to our senators. And then the last one is Senate Bill 18, and that is to create the workforce housing tax credit. And we have a pretty spending-averse legislature. I don't know that I need to tell you that. So, I was there today saying, yes, this is an expenditure of the state budget, but the gain is incredible when you talk about the amount of economic growth that's associated with that. There are, legislators from all parts of the state, but I'll tell you, this is not a Missoula issue, and I know you know that. And the dynamics that Colin laid out in terms of what's happened in the real estate industry and market in our country, there are world global effects that are affecting what's happening in Missoula and Malta and Hamilton and Havre. We're all pretty well connected, And so there was somebody that represents the League of Cities and Towns today, advocating and a proponent for our Senate Bill 18, which is workforce housing tax credits, because everywhere that they go, they cannot have a conversation with any mayor in any city in the state of Montana without housing affordability as the #1 issue that they're talking about. It's stymieing economic growth. People are not able to get ahead. People are moving out of the state, or they're not moving here. I mean, there's all sorts of issues as a result of this. So we have more attention on this issue at the state level, I think, than we've ever had, more momentum than ever. But we need a push. We need a push because they need to make a commitment. It's time. It's time we need to do it. So, yeah, that's my plug.
All right, great.
Yeah.
Bringing you back to
Okay.
our exercise this
Right.
evening. Lori, or Andrea, excuse me, is going to go over mortgage qualifications for several first-time homebuyer households to illustrate what is needed to qualify for several different types of loans and special financing and assistance currently available.
Okay, great. I did not make copies for you because, and bear with me, it's another spreadsheet. You guys are doing great. So my coworker Julie helped me put this together. Thank you so much, Julie. She is our first-time homebuyer educator at Homeward, and I would highly encourage you, your colleagues, your friends, to consider signing up for the class and our one-on-one pre-purchase housing counseling. So I want to start in the very corner. So what we did was we did 2 different loan types. And what we used was the numbers that Colin just helped illustrate. So we wanted to base this in some form of reality of what we've all just seen. So you can see on the left that we've got loan number 1, conventional financing with 5% down, a down payment of 5% of the total purchase price at 4.5% interest, which is generally where we're at right now. In this case, the purchase price for this townhome that we just looked at is $215,000. The down payment required, 5% down payment, would be $10,750. My plug there is, if somebody can afford their rental home, then they can afford to save for a down payment. But that is one of the elements in terms of the dynamics that are happening in the United States and in Missoula, is that the cost of rental homes is such that people are not saving for down payments. So then the credit score on this is 760. Okay, 760 is a really good credit score. That is the new premium that's been established as of this point in time. 760 is basically what gets you a pretty decent interest rate and a good interest rate. So the annual wages that would be needed in order to afford this purchase price is $56,000. When we keep just following the same column down in terms of what would be the monthly principal and interest to afford, again, a purchase price of $215,000, your monthly principal and interest is going to be a little over $1,000 a month. That's $1,035. And then you've got your monthly principal and mortgage interest of $65. Because without 20% down, you're paying mortgage interest. Mortgage insurance, I'm sorry, excuse me. And then monthly taxes, $197. This is an average. We're just picking averages from what we know around Missoula. And then monthly homeowner's insurance, $100. Your total principal, interest, taxes, and insurance is $1,397. If you were to live in this home for 30 years for the term of the mortgage, the total amount that you would end up paying would be $399,976. Okay, let's flip over to, on the right side, in the upper right-hand corner, we just want to look at what a federal housing agency, the FHA financing, would look like. And again, these are people we're counseling every day, so this is very typical. So we have, again, the purchase price of $215,000. The down payment in this case at 3.5% is $7,525. There is a requirement with FHA now after the recession. So after the recession, the number 1 mortgage insurance holder were you and I, taxpayers. And the government ended up underwater for the most part, with a whole lot of mortgages that were underwater. So after that, there was a regulatory change that required this upfront MIP fee for the duration of the mortgage. That was different 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you could get rid of that mortgage insurance payment. And so that's a challenging situation for people that might have to take out this type of mortgage, because basically the life of that mortgage is more expensive. So you can either roll that fee into the mortgage, you can finance it, which over time, of course, is going to cost you more money, or you can save for that MIP fee and pay it at closing. And in this example, we pay it at closing. The thing I want to articulate there is then it's about the same down payment, about $10,000 or more. The credit score in this example is 680, and not uncommon whatsoever. People are managing their credit and have some challenges with their credit for any number of reasons. It could be medical, it could be, having gone through a divorce, a circumstance, not being able to pay your credit cards on time, not knowing how to pay your credit cards on time, and how that affects your credit score. In this example, you actually need a little bit more income. You need $2,000 more. You need $58,000 to afford this mortgage. So going down, the monthly principal and interest, however, in this example is just a little bit more because of the less down payment that you put down. Right? You only put $7,500 down in this case. So it's $1,051. Your monthly MIP is $147 because of the FHA loan. Your monthly taxes is the same, $197, and your insurance, your monthly homeowner's insurance, is the same. So the monthly PITI, as we call it, is roughly about $100 more. So in this case, the homeowner, for a total cost over 30 years, is paying $442,000 over the course of that 30 years, which is $42,000 more, just in comparison, just because of some of those dynamics that we just worked through, some of those differences. Any questions on any of that? Let's go for it. Question in the back.
Would you please come up to the microphone?
Oh, please come up to the microphone so
Yeah.
we can get you recorded. I would walk over there with this one, but I'm attached to the podium.
They don't go that far, I'm sorry.
There's one right up here on this table right here. We'd love for the MCAT audience to be able to hear what question you have. You know what? Don't worry. We'll all look towards the spreadsheet.
What about those who get That's for the blooper reel.
There you go.
What about those of us on Social Security that can only make a certain amount and have a certain amount in the bank account?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we'll look at another mortgage example that will likely not be equivalent to a Social Security equivalent, because it's probably still more. And that's, in fact, one huge issue is people that are on fixed incomes. And the Housing Authority can speak more specifically to that. They do have a program through their Section 8 program that does allow folks that are receiving a Section 8 voucher to take that and convert it to a mortgage. It is complicated. We've been working with somebody through a pre-purchase housing counseling appointment. It's been really hard to make that happen. So
I would suggest you check with those two guys afterwards.
Absolutely.
Lori and Jim can answer that question.
Yeah, let's connect on that after. Thank you for your question. You did great. Okay, let's move down to the bottom half of the spreadsheet. So we wanted to show, again, on the left side, where we're at this point in time. January and February of 2019, the median home purchase price in Missoula was $295,000. So if you were going to do a conventional loan with 5% down, again, 30-year at 4.5% interest, the purchase price is $295,000. In this case, 5% is $14,750. Your credit score, again, has to be 760 in order to get this. So your annual wages needed is $76,500. The total amount of the mortgage, then, is $280,250. Your monthly principal and interest, you can see the numbers there. It's $1,419. Your monthly PMI is $93. Your monthly taxes is $270. Again, it's based on home value, and again, it's an average. And then your homeowner's insurance based on the value of your home is $120. Your monthly payment then is $1,900, $1,903. So that's what we're looking at right now for affording the median home price at this point in time. The other example that we wanted to show you was conventional financing. So this is on the right-hand side here, and it's an affordable example. This is kind of what we're saying. Okay, you know, if you've got down payment assistance and you're eligible for down payment assistance, we've got some programs in Missoula when we're lucky enough to be funded, when we have some resources. And so we want to look at what is the conventional financing at a 30-year and 4.5% interest. So in this example, we kind of work backwards. So why do we select $178,000? Because that's what this person could afford. So we're talking about a lot of people in Missoula. We also wanted to choose a number that you'd seen earlier. So that's $17.79 per hour. We just took that and said, okay, what's that? What's that annualized? That's $37,000. Okay, so we're saying, can that person afford a home in Missoula? Can they buy a home? And who earns $37,000? A lot of professionals earn $37,000. So at $178,000, the down payment required would be $5,000. This example, however, we used a credit score of 760 in order to maximize this person's purchasing power. So again, credit score at 760, the annual wages needed would be $37,000. We used two examples of down payment assistance that are available to us, but not always. They're competitive, they're funded. The first one is the Home Start program, and it's actually a member program that banks who are members through the Federal Home Loan Bank can access. So there's several banks here in Missoula that can access this down payment program. It's limited, and when it's gone, it's gone. But we work to get all of our customers and clients connected as soon as possible because it's an excellent program, and it's down payment assistance, and it's a gift, really, $7,500. It used to be where you had to pay it back, and the Federal Home Loan Bank has just said, just gift it. So it's really targeted for first-time homebuyers, but I'll tell you what, it's not actually restricted to that. It just turns out about 95% of the people that access it are first-time homebuyers. The second is the Human Resource Council no-interest down payment loan. Human Resource Council here in Missoula can access some funds that we mentioned earlier. Those are federal funds. So again, these are dollars that are dwindling. They have been dwindling over the years. And these are funds that we'd like to see be established either at maybe potentially the local level or at the state level. And so in this example, I'm just going to finish this and I'll be done. We're saying that if you have those two down payment assistance programs, your total mortgage would be $135,500. This is a customer we typically see. So their monthly principal and interest, $787. Monthly taxes, $163. The monthly homeowner's insurance, $75. And their monthly PITI payment, or monthly escrow payment, as you could think of it, would be a little under $1,000 or $925. Okay, I'll stop there because I went over. You can answer questions. I'm available for questions after. Thank you.
Thanks again, Andrea.
And there's a lot of factors I didn't talk about in addition to credit score, like student debt and all that kind of stuff.
Next we have Bob Oakes, Executive Director of the North Missoula Community Development Corporation, and he is going to tell us about the Land Trust Program, which provides affordability. So thank you, Bob, for being here.
Hi.
Why don't you take this and sit right there?
Okay.
Or can you, yeah, however you can get there. Don't sit behind the podium, though. Yeah. Okay.
And we have some handouts here.
I don't know if I can see this.
Oh, yeah, you want to sit over here?
All right, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks.
We'll get you a handout.
I see some friendly faces in here.
There we go.
Thanks. And, you know, one of the things I want to start out...
A little hot, closer to your face. Mike.
I want to give a tip of the hat to Nancy Leifer. And I see everybody in the front row nodding, because they know, and some of you others may not. But the most collaborative time I've ever seen in Missoula for home ownership was during the Missoula Housing Corporation days, when Nancy was kind of like our housing czar here in town. That was, or Czarina, I guess. And that was in the 90s, starting in the mid-90s. And everybody in the front row was involved in it. And it was really an exciting time. And I think I hope we're, as Colin said, we're getting into a period now where we can enjoy that same kind of enthusiasm and optimism about what can happen here if we all get together. But at that time, we had bankers, and we had the hospital, and we had all the nonprofits joining together in partnership. And it was to try to get some housing on the north side. It was the North Missoula Housing Partnership came out of that program, and it ended up getting about 35 households into first-time ownership. And it just got to the point where it was too expensive to do it, and I think it was maybe a flagging political will that didn't carry on with the program. There are probably a number of different reasons, but we started out on the north side. We had only 20, that's the north side, north of the railroad tracks, only 26% home ownership, and we were able to bring that up incrementally, and we probably ended up on the north side, west side, and part of downtown got 35 families into homes. And then how that program worked was up to $20,000 and 2% second mortgage money, and $5,000 in down payment assistance that was written off as a grant if folks stayed in their homes for 5 years. But then as prices started to escalate in Missoula, that was no longer enough to do it. So what we did with it as the North Missoula Community Development Corporation, when everybody started to ask, well, how much is too much subsidy to put into an individual home, is when we started our Community Land Trust program. And that's a shared equity program. And if you look at the first sheet here, you can see that it's a comparative example of, and of course changes with location and time and year and so on, but it gives you an example of what happens if someone were to be a renter for 7 years, or someone were to be a community land trust owner for 7 years, or somebody were to have a regular fee simple market rate home for 7 years, and that's the last column on the right. So the price of the house would be considered the same, and we have to bring subsidy to it. I should premise this all by saying that what Community Land Trust does, it's kind of like the first rung for many people. It can be, can be your first and last house if you're happy to stay there, and you can stay there for as long as you want. You don't have to be income qualified for the entire time that you own the house, just when you buy it. So this is an example of what happens to people who do get in. It's heavily subsidized at first, but that subsidy is transferred to the next person when the house is resold. So you can see the next line down is the affordability investment. It's not applicable, of course, to rentals. If it's $109,000 for CLT ownership, it's not applicable also for fee simple. You're paying the full rate. So you'll see what the total purchase price is, $170 versus $279, and as that carries down, when you get to the final resale of it, you can see at the bottom what it means in terms of financial gain. So a community land trust homeowner gains much less than a market rate homeowner, but the alternative for the for that community land trust homeowner would have been renting for the entire time and building no equity whatsoever. So folks are actually paying off mortgages. And as life situations change, they are also able to have stable housing prices whereby they can invest in other things such as education or adequate health care or all the things that are essential for folks. And Community Land Trust, we have over the space of well, we started our first project was in 2002, and our current project is just finishing up now, and it's right down across from where the new library will be, Lee Gordon Place. We'll have developed 54 houses. It's not a lot, but what it is, and it's very expensive to do because it's very expensive to get in the door to build it. But what we have done is they are all permanently affordable, and on resale they remain affordable. So that first investment of 54 houses we've already served over 100 families getting into home ownership, and many of those, the majority of those who have moved on and stayed in Missoula have gone to regular market rate housing. Some of them, we still have some of our first-time buyers still in the homes. So, so I have this handout for you. You can see in this sheet what happens to market rate housing, and then the blue dots are the spread of what has happened with community land trust homes. So it's been very stable and much less dramatic in its increase. So in other words, it's permanent affordability, and it stays here to serve the community. I have this handout available for anybody that wants. So I also have another handout that you can grab that deals with who is buying now in Missoula and some of our income inequality that is happening here that is more dramatic than most of you might imagine. But take a look at how we compare with some other cities. Thanks.
So we have just two more components to the presentation.
Just one for Erin.
Oh, okay. Erin Pehan is here. She's Director of Housing and Community Development for the City of Missoula. And
Thanks.
she's going to tell us about the Housing Policy Planning Project, which is underway now, and how we all can be involved in that. Thank you for being here tonight, Erin.
This is the microphone friend.
Thank you guys for having me. Again, my name is Erin Pahan. I'm the Director of the Office of Housing and Community Development for the City of Missoula. And I just want to talk with you very briefly, because I know we're running out of time, a little bit about our housing policy creation process at the City of Missoula and what we're focusing on throughout that. So on the screen there you'll see the outline of what we're calling a three-phase housing policy community-driven housing policy creation. Phase 1 was completed in the summer of this year and really focused on the formation of a community-driven housing policy steering committee. That housing policy steering committee was comprised of 26 community members from all sectors in the community, folks from our local trade unions, realtors, both private and nonprofit development partners, folks from the university, from the hospital systems, from kind of our economic sector. And they really assisted us in creating some broad-based guiding principles that would steer the housing policy work to ensure that we were creating policy that was really benefiting the entire community. In the fall of this year, we moved into phase 2 of that work. And phase 2 of that work is defined through the formation of technical working groups. Our technical working groups were charged with distilling those broad-based recommendations into very specific policy recommendations. They also were charged with creating a really robust assessment framework and benchmark so that we could hold ourselves accountable to the policy to ensure that we were really making progress both on housing affordability and housing supply across our community for all levels of affordability, not just that deeply subsidized housing, which is incredibly important, but also affordability for our professionals. We're constantly hearing that businesses are having a hard time recruiting at all levels, including doctors and lawyers, because they can't find housing here that they can afford and that meets their requirements for that price. In March, just last month, or just this month, we're moving into phase 3 of our housing policy work, and that includes community engagement and outreach, and presenting those policy recommendations to City Council and to the public so we can start to get feedback on those. I'm going to flip through a few slides here to talk a little bit about what those technical working groups look like. So those technical working groups are overseen by a housing policy leadership team, and that leadership team is comprised of elected officials and key leadership staff with the city and with Missoula County. We still are gaining feedback from our Housing Policy Steering Committee, that broad-based group of community members who are guiding that process. And then we have 5 technical working groups that are comprised of people with deep expertise in these areas. So city, county staff members, folks from the private sector that are really helping us figure out what barriers exist today to creating housing supply and creating a housing affordability across our community. So those working groups include funding and revenue, really looking at what resources we have at our disposal today to support the development of affordable housing. And Andrea did a lovely job talking about what we don't have and some efforts that are currently underway to try to bolster that. But looking at what we do have and trying to use that as strategically as possible. Looking at regulation and code, making sure that our land use policies are in alignment with our goals as a community and are supporting housing development, not hindering it. Looking at public education and outreach, telling the story of what housing means to Missoulians, what it means to have a home and how that creates stability and how that supports economic growth. Innovation and capacity building, looking at the ways that we do things and figuring out where we can innovate for efficiency and where we can increase public and private partnerships for better outcomes. And then lastly, looking at preserving and creating true affordable housing, so that housing that meets those income qualifications, that's serving folks who are living with incomes that fall below the median income. That also includes preserving what we have on the ground today, so that as we're building new affordable housing, we're not losing housing on the back end and just treading water. That includes looking at the role that mobile home parks play in our community and figuring out how we can support the preservation of mobile home parks as well. And I want to talk a little bit about our housing policy vision, and Andrea touched a little bit about the power of homes. So we know that homes and the power of homes intersect with almost every social issue in our community. Safe and healthy homes are the foundation for educational success. Diversity of home types and affordability levels allow our local economy to thrive. Safe and healthy homes support individual and community health, and access to homes we can afford enables Missoulians to improve our circumstances and thrive, and that really speaks to social mobility. It allows people to change their position in life through the investment of a home. And then lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about our approach to community-driven policy development. It was incredibly important to us throughout this process that this policy be driven by the community. Housing touches everyone's life in our community. And so we identified a pre-release outreach plan and a post-release outreach plan. Prior to policy release, our focus has really been gathering targeted and specific feedback from stakeholders, individuals and groups that are impacted by housing policy changes, and specific demographics that have unique needs. This has included stakeholder meetings, focus groups, visiting with all of our neighborhood leadership teams, and then really having targeted, focused listening sessions with our social service providers and practitioners in our community. After we release the plan, we're going to really focus on community open houses, getting the word out, providing different avenues for people to comment. But we're taking a little extra time to engage in neighborhood canvassing. This is going a little bit further than the traditional city process of policy development and feedback. We know that some of our constituents in our community have barriers to engaging in public process. Those could be a lack of childcare, they could be transportation. Folks could work during the evening hours and not be able to come to an open house or engage with a public official. And so we wanted to remove those barriers, especially for individuals living in our lowest income neighborhoods like Central Missoula, Northside, Westside, Southgate Triangle. And so we're canvassing and door knocking in those areas during all hours so that we can get that feedback from those individuals who are perhaps impacted most by this issue. And just to give you a sense of what we've done so far, we've had 26 stakeholder meetings with different folks across the community. We've had 4 listening sessions with our service providers and community members, and 4 focus groups with 20 developers in the community of all ranges, small-scale developers all the way up to large subdivision developers, to make sure that, really to ground truth some of the recommendations that we're considering. We corresponded with all of our neighborhood leadership teams and presented at 12 of those meetings. And through our canvassing efforts, which we just started last week, we've reached 25 households to get feedback. So before this policy, these policy recommendations even get presented to the public in draft form, we've already spoken individually or in a group setting with 355 of our community members to help us create this policy. And so just lastly, again, going up to that process, we hope to present a draft form of our policy recommendations to City Council the first week in May, and then we'll be engaging in that outreach throughout the month of May to get more feedback from the community.
Thank you, Erin. And Nancy is going to provide us with a wrap-up. Thank you, Nancy.
The library will be closing in 30 minutes. Weatherly and the other public internet computers will close in 15 minutes.
This is what you call a hard stop.
So the library will be closing in 30 minutes, but we wanted to have time for you to come up and talk with all of our presenters one-on-one. So let me just real quickly summarize that what we've learned tonight is that about 49% of Missoula's renters are paying more than 30% of their income for rent. That adds up to 7,528 individuals in that area that are overburdened with their housing costs. We've learned that we're not adding new units in our rental stock quick enough to be able to address that need. We're adding about 30 units a year, and we have a gap of about 5,000 units. We learned that there are a couple of bills in front of the state legislature right now that are available that would help address that need. And they are House Bill 16 and Senate Bill 18, so if any of you are interested in contacting your state legislators to encourage them to support those 2 pieces of legislation, that would be a good thing to do. We learned that about 25%, actually we didn't learn this, but I'll let you know now, about 25% of Missoula's homeowners are actually paying more than 30% of their income for their housing as well. So we have a community in which a lot of people are paying too much for their housing. And we also learned that new construction costs have gone up and that it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to build new housing right now that fits the dimensions of what we need, both on the renter side and on the home ownership side. So we really do need to think about ways and means of either bringing those costs down or bringing in more financing to help pay for the cost of new housing. The renter vacancy rate in Missoula, by the way, has been consistently at 3% for several years now, and the ideal vacancy rate is 5%, so that we have a ways to go to be able to get to where we're going to be stabilizing our rents. Just all of that adds up to, I think, the answer to the question about myths and realities of Missoula and affordable housing crisis. Yes, we are, and yes, the city is stepping up and is going to be proposing a whole new batch of policies coming up in May. And I know that the city wants to hear from people about those policies when they come out. So we will be looking for 2 things coming up in the near future. A week from Thursday, or this Thursday, Colin? A week from Thursday. A week from this coming Thursday, a week from tomorrow, the new 2019 housing report based on 2018 data will be available. And it will be released at a special meeting at the Edgewater at 10 o'clock in the morning, a week from tomorrow at 10 o'clock at the Edgewater. And then in May, watch for the city's new housing policy that will be coming out, with, I'm sure, opportunities for people to come and hear more about it and to comment on that. So with that, I'd like to wrap up the evening and invite you all to talk with these people more one-on-one for the next 10 or 15 minutes while we put everything away. Thank you so much for coming.